Hey guys. I'm sure all of you have seen like the title and not sure what's going to happen. So I'm going to talk today. My name is Chen, by the way. I'm going to talk today about a little bit about beer fermentation, and mainly going to talk about how side projects change between life before serverless and after serverless, and then we're going to create together a tiny serverless project for the beer fermentation process. Hope it's going to be fun for you guys. So a little bit about me. I'm Chen. I'm a senior engineer at Hexagon. I'm a fresh dad. I have a daughter. Her name is Yuval. She's my side project. So I get excited when I talk about her. And I love homemade beers, obviously. So how it all started is that a colleague of mine called me one day and told me he wants to automate his beer fermentation process. And I love beer, but I have no idea what he meant. So my first reaction was, what are you talking about? And he went on explaining how to do home brewing. Don't worry, I'm not gonna teach Dutch people how to make beer. So you go from mashing to boiling to fermentation, and the most important part right before filtering is the fermentation part, because that's the actual part that you need to monitor. And how he started explaining how you do it. So he manually been taking like a tube where you put to the fermentation tank, you put out the beer, and then once you enter the yeast inside the tank, it's starting eating all the sugar and creating the alcohol and doing like all the fermentation magic. And he needs to keep constantly measuring it. And right after the final measurement, he can also understand if the fermentation ended and like the alcohol by volume. And so I started asking him why he wants something to monitor that. So his main issues were that the fermentation can get stuck, and he can wait like weeks, and he doesn't know what happens inside his fermentation tank, and this means that all our friends are not going to get beer, so everyone being angry. So he doesn't know when it started, doesn't know when it ended, and what got me on board is that every time you measure it manually, you can't bring it back. I don't know the exact reason why, but you can't, and this means that you're wasting beer. So that's what got me to start thinking about like a solution. So I started thinking about how can I automate this. So we looked up online and we realized that there's ways of doing measurement that are tilt-based. You can just put like a cool tool which you do it yourself. It's called the Eichspindel. I see that it's also a German, that you can just put the tool inside, and it can send you every 2 seconds the gravity and temperature to any endpoint that you want. So I got that covered, and I started to think about how can I plan the backend. And usually when you go into side projects, you either go 2 ways. So the first way was thinking about going with servers. And this is how it looks like when I try to figure out what's going on inside my system if I'm going server, because I need to install Nginx or Flask and start to configure things and configure my MongoDB. And this is the kind of things that really kill your side projects, and I decided not to let servers kill my creativity. So I went to obvious serverless, because in serverless, as much of you like try to experiment and probably have that in production, it's like Lego, right? You just stick components together, it's fully managed, everything is also scaled, and so I decided to design my project with serverless. So let's start thinking about what exactly we want to have in our project. This is the part like we all building a project together. I hope that you're ready. So we want to be able to get the gravity and temperature data from the fermentation tank. We want to store that data in a database. We want to be able to access it. We want to see the fermentation process as it happens and maybe generate like cool charts. And we also want to be alerted on if something bad happens. My friend specifically asked that every time the fermentation is stuck for over like a few minutes, he wants to get a message and page his wife. She's also home with the kid and tell her like stir it or do something, unless I'm gonna get home and I'm not gonna get my beer, so it's gonna be very devastating. So he wants alerts on that. So the first thing we already can scratch because we have that tiny tool, right? It already sent us, but we need a way to store it. So first thing in the project, what database you want to store? It's gonna be a SQL, no SQL. I decided to went with DynamoDB because it's fully serverless. You can now have that feature of on demand. You pay per the actual usage. You don't need to pay something constantly. You just pay for the amount of requests that you do. And in terms of how to design that, it's key value, right? So how to design that data structure, we have a hash key. The hash is a beer name because maybe this project is going to be successful, so we're going to have like many types of beers. And the timestamp range, so we can every 2 seconds add that record to the DB. And the value is obviously the gravity. So a way of being able to store that data is using Lambda, obviously. And let's not forget that we also want to be able to have that system accessed with our fermentation tech. So we have that whatever tilt measurement tool that is sending every 2 seconds, and want to be able to access our Lambda. So doing that, we just leverage on API gateway, so it can post the data points. And that's like in terms of how we get the data from the fermentation tank into a database. So the next thing you want to do is to be able to view that and see charts or be able to access it anytime as it happens. So let's take a look again at our architecture. We have something writing to the database. Now we also need something reading from the database. So obviously it's going to be another Lambda with another API gateway that is trying to query the database. But we have a tool that is sending every 2 seconds over 1 million data points. And if I just want to view like all the points all the time, this means I'm going to read from the database a month, loads of times, and because I say it's per use, so it's nice. So if I do less, I'm going to pay less. But if I'm going to do a lot more, I'm going to also probably kill my side project. So this is something that's we need to think about how to optimize it. And usually when you think about optimization, we don't think about side projects when doing that, because side projects is something you do like on the fly. You don't think about like redesigning, but if we properly design it, we can also cost a lot of money, and that project will fail anyway. So we have to invest a little bit of time of optimizing. So my solution for that is doing downsampling. This means that every time I write to the DB, I want lesser time being written to another DB with an aggregated data that has that average. So this means I have 1 million points. I want that they will conclude in my other database as like 100 points. So anyone knows how to link between these databases? I have a Lambda now that is writing to the database the aggregated data, and I have another Lambda that is writing each point. Anyone has any idea how to connect between those? Yes, DynamoDB streams, very good. Yeah, this was an easy question. So once I connect DynamoDB streams, obviously, I can, each time anyone changes the database, I'm being invoked with my Lambda, and I can also create a new record of the average. So I can take the original data point and have them query the average table. So the next thing I want to talk about is that I don't want to look at the chart. Charts are nice, but I don't want to look at them all the time. I want to be able to get alert when something is something being broken in my system. And if we take a look at our architecture right now, we have that Lambda that is writing to the database, and another one that is writing to the average table. And we need to figure out of something that is be able to monitor and alert us when something happens. Any thoughts about that? You can just raise your hand and have like a idea of what to do. Yes? What? CloudWatch? What we'll do with CloudWatch? Alerts? Okay, so how do you use CloudWatch to alert you if the fermentation is ended? You have to like custom define. Okay, that's a nice idea. SNS, that's a great idea. Yes. Anyone else has any other idea? Yeah, that's also SNS. You heard it was a great idea, so you want to jump in. Okay. So you're right. I want to have a Lambda that is being able to read from the database and send an SNS. But how do I, what type of Lambda will be good for that? How do I know, how can I add something that will query all the time my database in serverless? Okay, no, not another stream. Schedule, very good. So using CloudWatch events, I want to make it, I can use streams, but I not necessarily want to get like invoked every time. Even my second database is being written, because that's also gonna be not that efficient. So using a CloudWatch event, I can time it to, I don't know, whatever I want, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and then I can create a Lambda that will, all it does is read from that database. And once it triggers something that might be interesting for me, it can publish different types of SNS. And with SNS, it's very interesting, because with SNS, you can probably do anything. You can have that trigger another Lambda, and that Lambda can write to PagerDuty, Twilio, Slack, whatever you want. So if I want to connect that back to my architecture, I can just take that Lambda, write an SNS, invoke another Lambda, which write to Twilio, and then it's going to send an SMS to my friend and tell him the fermentation ended. Okay, he doesn't need to have his wife keep checking if things are wrong, and he can do that himself. So let's try to wind back to how much all of this is going to cost me. Any thoughts? Any guesses? Okay, I have some free tier over there. It could be a free tier if I wouldn't be like a heavy user of that, but it can be much more. Maybe if we look at like all the components that we use inside our project, we can see that we have our Lambda function, which is writing almost like each time it sends there's like 1 million data points, but to also query it, and with the DynamoDB streams and stuff like that, it's going to cost around $0.2, and in total it's going to be less than $5 for a side project, which is like pretty nice. But we think about, we just built a monitoring solution to beer fermentation. And that solution is also serverless. So how do we debug it? What happens if something breaks? You have X-ray, right? Any other ideas? Yes, I got Hexagon in the crowd. Yeah, so X-ray is actually a very good solution for that. You can also use CloudWatch logs for that. Specifically in Hexagon, I haven't said a word about Hexagon since I started my presentation, so I can do one slide, if you may. So in Hexagon, what we do a monitoring solution for serverless application. And I actually took that serverless project. We also in Hexagon to our own backend, which is 99% fully serverless. We also use Hexagon on that. I know it's how it sounds, but we do that because that's the only way to be able to get such great alerts on specific data flows and be able to like pinpoint what really happened. And in a word about what we do in Hexagon, we do automated distributed tracing out of the box. We instrument the functions code and be able to monitor what happens, and also bring visual debugging and sending out alerts. And this is the project that I written, how it's visualized in Hexagon. We have that CloudWatch event triggering a Lambda that is trying to monitor the average DB, and that way, if something breaks in my serverless application, I also gonna get monitored about that, like my friend got monitored about the beer fermentation process. I think my main gist about this lecture is to make you guys understand that you don't need to, you can use serverless for side projects because it's much more convenient. It's gonna cost you much less, and it's pretty easy. And I just want to tell you that don't let servers kill your creativity. And that's it.
Open for any questions? Does anybody have any questions? Oh,
So, for instance, the sensor that you were talking about that measured the tilt and everything, it's supposed to send messages every 2 seconds. And if it doesn't do that, you can basically say, I expect a message every 2 seconds.
Exactly.
And there should be an alert if it's not the case.
Yes, because I expect it to be sent every 2 seconds, so I know that that database is supposed to get data. If I'm not getting that, I also monitor that and know that something went wrong with that and it ran out of battery, or my router in home went.
Yep.
Any other question?
What I see is you use Hexagon by CloudFormation, deploying CloudFormation
Yes.
script. So will it be also extra cost for your account when you use Hexagon?
What is that?
Extra cost for you, for us?
So in terms of extra cost, all we do is stream logs to our backend. When we also filter, in terms like when you deploy CloudFormation, we filter specific start time and end time of logs. And when you think about like in terms of cost, it's something that is like less than a penny if you have billions of invocations a month. We also notify that in our website in terms of what we add, which is pretty neglectable.
Does it work on Azure?
It
Azure.
We do have a wrapper for Azure Functions. Yes, Hexagon is mainly focused on serverless solution, mainly for AWS, but we do have wrappers that you can instrument our code with Azure and with Google Cloud Function, and basically on any other platform, but we also have like something that is dedicated for Azure too.
So you said in the beginning something about nice charts. Where are they?
About live shots?
Yeah.
I'll be right back with the tray with the shots.
So my question was more like.
Sorry, man. No, because they asked me at the beginning if I'm gonna bring beer, so I had that.
No.
All right.
I saw like charts of the
in terms of chart,
process.
yeah.
So did you do that, and how?
Okay, so I just use a Python script that will, that's the libraries that allow you to draw a chart. I just read from that endpoint and get the points, and then I just print them out. Yeah, you can write something, I don't know, in like pretty quick in React, and use some graph that will just take those data points and you can view them as a chart. We have another question there.
Probably totally unrelated to the serverless itself, but how do you get data from fermentation process itself? So like from barrels or...
Yeah, so what I example in the beginning, there's a tool called Spindle. It's like a tiny tool that sends data on to any REST API. So it keeps constantly sending that data.
Oh, but I meant you have some Raspberry Pi stuff?
No,
or...
that tool itself, you can just buy it. I have that link there. You can ping me later, I can show you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Where?
Thanks. So you used DynamoDB to store the events, and then you needed another Lambda to compute the average over some events. So did you consider using a database that supports averages?
Yes, but inside projects, you want to do things quick and dirty. And that was like the easiest way I can think of doing. And I don't want to have the overhead of like defining a scheme and have like something very complicated. Even in terms of cost, if I'm going to have like an RDS instance, it's probably going to cost much money than I just can go and buy a beer. So I don't want to do that.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Cool.